Simmons. And even if you don't think you do, trust me, you've heard it. Maybe it's from that legendary "damn" catchphrase in WWE, or maybe you remember that historic night in 1992 when he shocked the world by beating Vader to become the first black WCW World Heavyweight Champion. For a lot of fans, that moment was the peak of his career. And for years, people have told this story like it's a rise. But no one really discusses his tragic downfall. Intense feuds, locker room drama, and his awful end. This is his story. Ron grew up in Perry, Georgia, and from the start, he was the kind of athlete who stood out. In high school, he played both tight end and linebacker. He won Lineman of the Year in 1976 and made first-team All-State. Everyone could see he was special. Florida State University knew it too, and they recruited him hard. At Florida State University, Simmons was a star from day one. Coach Bobby Bowden even said in his freshman year that Simmons was turning the program around. He wasn't wrong. By the time Simmons finished his college career, he was a two-time All-American, the team captain, and a finalist for the Lombardi Award. Florida State retired his number 50 jersey and later put him in their Athletics Hall of Fame. After college, Simmons went pro. He played in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns, in the USFL for the Tampa Bay Bandits, and even in Canada for the Ottawa Rough Riders. His football career didn't last long, but it gave him the discipline and toughness that would make him a natural in the wrestling ring. He made the jump to wrestling in 1986, joining Jim Crockett Promotions, which would later become WCW. A few years in, he teamed with Butch Reed to form Doom. They were big, strong, and mean, wrestling under masks at first. Managed by Teddy Long, they won the WCW World Tag Team Championship and made a name for themselves as one of the toughest teams around. But it was in 1992 that Simmons made history. On August 2nd, Sting was scheduled to face Vader for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, but Sting was injured in the storyline. WCW booker Bill Watts gave Simmons the shot instead. The match was intense. Then Simmons hit Vader with a massive power slam and got the 3 count. The crowd went crazy. Ron Simmons had just become the first black WCW World Heavyweight Champion. It was a huge moment, not just for Simmons, but for wrestling history. His reign lasted about 5 months before Vader won the title back. After that, Simmons' position started to slide. He stayed in WCW for a while, feuding with other wrestlers and even turning heel, but eventually he left. And this was the beginning of a downfall no one had expected. During the beginning of this end, he also fell into a deep controversy. When Ron Simmons came to the WWF in 1996, it was supposed to be a fresh start. New company, new opportunities, new chapter. But instead, it quickly turned into one of the most talked about backstage stories of his career. It all started with his feud with Ahmed Johnson, a feud that went way beyond scripted wrestling. This was personal, and it all revolved around something wrestlers take very seriously, the unwritten locker room code. Simmons debuted in WWF as Faarooq Assad. The gimmick? A gladiator. Blue and black armor. A weird helmet that looked like it came from a dollar store Halloween section. He had Sonny as his manager, but the whole thing just flopped. Fans didn't buy it, and it didn't take long before the character had to be reworked. Even so, his very first rivalry in WWF was with Ahmed Johnson. It kicked off when Faarooq attacked Ahmed during a tag match where Ahmed was teaming with Shawn Michaels. Right from the jump, there was heat between them, on screen and, as it turned out, off screen too. Here's where things took a turn. Ahmed had a reputation. Big guy, impressive look, explosive power. But in the ring, he was known for being reckless. Wrestling is physical, but there's an understanding. You take care of the person you're in there with. Ahmed didn't always do that, and in one match, he legitimately injured Ron Simmons. Simmons later said it was bad enough to put him out for about a month. This wasn't part of the storyline, this was real. And in wrestling, if someone hurts you carelessly, there's an old school way of making things right. They call it a receipt. During a 6-man street fight, Simmons hit Ahmed with a spine buster that drove Ahmed's head into his ribs. Broke the ribs, punctured a lung, put him in the hospital. Ahmed himself admitted, "You put me in the hospital, I'll put you back in the hospital." It was that kind of war. Now, Ahmed tells a different story. He claims Simmons was jealous of him and that the injury was about ego, not just payback. But here's the thing. Almost everyone in the locker room sided with Simmons. Guys like Mark Henry and The Godfather have talked about how Ahmed's reckless style and bad attitude rubbed people the wrong way. The Godfather even remembered a moment when Simmons whipped Ahmed with a belt during a Nation of Domination segment, and everyone basically saw it as deserved. This wasn't just one incident. Ahmed's whole reputation backstage was shaky, and in wrestling, if the locker room turns on you, your career can go downhill fast. This feud with Simmons is often pointed to as one of the big reasons Ahmed's push in WWF stopped cold. The company didn't punish Simmons. In fact, it looked like they supported him. He was a respected veteran, and veterans were often given the role of keeping the locker room in check. In other words, sometimes the bosses let the wrestlers police themselves. And that's exactly what happened here. Ahmed did join Simmons' Nation of Domination for a short time, but a legit injury forced him out almost immediately. Whether that injury was from the receipt or something else, it ended his run in the group before it really began. This whole situation showed just how powerful that unspoken code can be in wrestling. If you don't protect the people you're working with, you're not just breaking trust, you're breaking the foundation of the business. Simmons, as a respected vet, made sure Ahmed paid the price. Of course, depending on who you ask, the story changes. Simmons says it was payback. Ahmed says it was jealousy. But with so many wrestlers backing Simmons, Ahmed's version doesn't hold much weight for most fans and historians. Either way, that chapter ended with Simmons still standing strong, and Ahmed on the outs. After the short-lived gladiator experiment, WWF reintroduced Ron Simmons as Faarooq. This time he was the leader of a new faction called the Nation of Domination. The group's look and tone were inspired by militant black movements from real life. It was not cartoonish, but it was designed to get a reaction. Early members included Crush, Savio Vega, and the rap duo PG-13, who performed the entrance music live. The mix was unusual, but it did not last long. Simmons started making changes. He removed the original members and brought in Kama Mustafa, D'Lo Brown, and briefly Ahmed Johnson. Then came the biggest shift. Rocky Maivia turned heel and joined the Nation. That changed everything. The Rock had natural charisma, and every week the audience reacted to him more. The more he talked, the more it became clear where the company's focus was headed. By March 1998, the transition was complete. On Raw, The Rock officially replaced Faarooq as leader. On TV, it was framed as betrayal. In reality, it was a strategic move. WWE saw The Rock as the future and wanted him in a leading role. The Nation kept its momentum with The Rock in charge, adding Mark Henry and continuing to be a key faction in the Attitude Era. For Simmons, losing the leadership role could have been a setback, but it also showed his adaptability. He had built the group from the ground up, and even if the spotlight shifted, his role in creating that platform was undeniable. When the group eventually ended, Simmons still had what every wrestler valued most. He had credibility with his peers and a career strong enough to keep moving forward. Actually, now that you've reached here, I want to apologize for the clickbait. There is no sob story, and clearly there was no tragic end to his career. He is just one of my favorites, and it kills me that people have forgotten him. When the Nation of Domination ended, Ron Simmons could have easily faded from the spotlight. He had lost the leadership role to The Rock, and for a while it looked like WWE did not have a clear plan for him. Some weeks he was not even on TV. At one point, he was given a strange gimmick where he was brainwashed by a white cult leader character. It was not his best run, and for a bit, his place on the roster felt shaky. Things changed in November 1998. Still going by Faarooq, Simmons was paired with Bradshaw, later known as JBL, to form the Acolytes. At first, they were an intimidating, hard-hitting team working under the Undertaker's Ministry of Darkness. They wore dark gear with strange symbols and acted like the muscle of the group. The chemistry between Simmons and Bradshaw clicked immediately, and before long, they were two-time World Tag Team Champions. In 2000, they changed things up and became the Acolytes Protection Agency, the APA. This was the role that took them to another level. The gimmick came from real life. Bradshaw had been drinking and playing cards at a party when Vince and Shane McMahon saw how naturally funny he was. They pitched the idea of him and Simmons playing beer drinking, poker playing bodyguards for hire. Simmons loved it because it was basically who they already were behind the scenes. The APA's office became one of the most famous parts of the act. Wrestlers would knock, pay them for protection, and the APA would go back to drinking beer and playing cards. They played it dead serious, which made it even funnier. Fans loved it, and the team stayed popular for years. They won a third tag title in 2001 and became one of the most well-liked teams of the Attitude Era. Around this time, Simmons also picked up the catchphrase that would follow him for the rest of his career, DAMN. It started by accident. In matches when something went wrong, he would just say it naturally and fans started yelling it back. His deep voice made it even better. The writers noticed and ran with it. Over time, damn became his trademark, showing up in quick comedy segments and surprise appearances long after his full-time run ended. When WWE split into two brands in 2002, Simmons went to SmackDown and Bradshaw to Raw. They reunited briefly in 2003 and even won the OVW Southern Tag Team titles, but by 2004, Simmons' full-time career was winding down. In a storyline, he was fired on SmackDown, but he still made guest appearances for years, mostly to deliver that one word the crowd loved to hear. He also wrestled for smaller promotions like Maryland Championship Wrestling. In 2012, Simmons was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. His longtime partner Bradshaw was the one to introduce him, which made the moment even better. And of course, Simmons ended his speech with a final "damn" to close the night. The Hall of Fame spot was not just for his tag team success, it was also for his historic achievement in WCW back in 1992, when he became the first African American to win a recognized World Heavyweight Championship. When you really look at it, his career after the Nation was not a fall from grace, it was a reinvention. He went from leading a controversial faction to being part of one of the most entertaining tag teams in WWE history. And even though he never got another singles world title run in WWE, his popularity stayed strong for years. Simmons also had personal challenges along the way. He has talked openly about having a drinking problem around WrestleMania 20. He admitted it caused trouble that night, took the blame for it, and made it clear that WWE supported him through it. It was not the reason he left the company, and it did not define the rest of his career. If all you measure is championship runs, then Simmons' WWE career might look smaller than his WCW run. But championships are not the only measure of success. He stayed in wrestling for decades, earned the respect of his peers, and influenced the next generation. Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown have both said Simmons inspired them and paved the way for black wrestlers in the business. The idea that his career had a tragic downfall does not really match the facts. Sure, his singles push at the very top ended when The Rock took over the Nation, but Simmons found another lane and made it work. He turned a real-life friendship with Bradshaw into one of the most beloved acts of the Attitude Era. He created a catchphrase that fans still repeat today, and when it was all said and done, he walked away with a Hall of Fame ring and a career that fans remember with respect and affection. Looking back at Ron Simmons' career, the idea of a tragic downfall just doesn't hold up. His story isn't about falling from the top. It's about breaking barriers, staying relevant, and adapting to whatever the business threw at him. From his days as a standout football player to becoming the first black man to hold the WCW World Heavyweight Championship, Simmons proved over and over that he had the skill, discipline, and presence to stand out in any arena. That win in 1992 wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a moment that changed the conversation in wrestling, opening doors for the stars who came after him. Sure, he had moments that could have been seen as setbacks. The real-life tension with Ahmed Johnson was a reminder that wrestling isn't all scripted smiles and stage drama. Losing the leadership of the Nation of Domination to The Rock might look like a demotion on paper, but in reality, it was part of WWE's plan to build one of its biggest stars, and Simmons had the professionalism to roll with it. Instead of fading away, he reinvented himself. The APA run with Bradshaw showed his comedic side while keeping his tough guy credibility intact. Fans loved it, and the "damn" catchphrase turned into one of the most enduring one-liners in wrestling history. Even in guest appearances years after retiring, that one word would still get a huge reaction. The Hall of Fame induction in 2012 summed it all up. Simmons' career wasn't just about titles or main events. It was about impact, respect, and longevity. He didn't crash and burn. He adjusted, he stayed relevant, and he left the business better than he found it. That's not a downfall. That's a legacy. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep dives into wrestling's most iconic careers, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't. The tragic end came in a British Columbia hospital room in August 2018. The man lying in that bed barely resembled the giant who once soared through wrestling rings around the world. Don Leo Jonathan, the Mormon giant, had been hospitalized for 2 months. His massive frame, once capable of backflips and drop kicks, was now confined to medical equipment and sterile walls. But what most people don't know is that Don Leo Jonathan lived one of the most amazing lives in wrestling history. This wasn't just another big man who relied on size and strength. This was a true pioneer who changed everything we thought we knew about what giants could do in the ring. Don Leo Jonathan's story begins in 1931 in Hurricane, Utah. He was born Don Heaton into a family where wrestling wasn't just entertainment, it was the family business. His father, Jonathan DeLon Heaton, wrestled under the name Brother Jonathan and was known as the Mormon missionary. Wrestling was literally in Don Leo's blood. What makes his story remarkable is how early it all started. As a teenager, Don Leo was already stepping into professional wrestling rings. Most promoters wouldn't let kids anywhere near their shows, but in New York, they made an exception. Why? Because his mother wrote a special permission slip. That simple piece of paper opened the door to one of wrestling's greatest careers. Before wrestling became his life, Don Leo was building the foundation that would make him special. After graduating high school in Cedar City, Utah, he joined the United States Navy. He did his basic training at Treasure Island in San Francisco. In the Navy, he played football and pushed his body to new limits. But here's where his story gets really interesting. After his military service, Don Leo became a commercial deep-sea diver. Think about what that job requires. You need incredible physical conditioning. You need perfect breath control. You need mental strength that most people can't imagine. You're working underwater in dangerous conditions where one mistake could kill you. This wasn't just another job for Don Leo. It was training. Every dive made him stronger. Every dangerous situation underwater taught him how to stay calm under pressure. When he finally stepped into wrestling rings full-time, he brought skills that no other big man had ever possessed. Don Leo Jonathan's professional wrestling career officially started in 1949, though some records say 1950. Either way, he was young and already showing signs of something special. He began by teaming with his father in tag team matches before going solo. What happened next changed wrestling forever. Don Leo didn't just become successful, he became a global phenomenon. Over 3 decades, from the 1950s through 1980, he collected an incredible 45 championship titles. These weren't just local wins either. He wrestled in Europe, South Africa, Australia, and Japan. But his biggest success came in the United States and Canada. In 1955, he captured the Montreal World Heavyweight title twice with Canadian Athletic Promotions. In Toronto, he teamed with Gene Kiniski to win the Canadian Open Tag Team title in 1959. He won the AWA World Heavyweight Championship in Omaha 3 times in 1961. But his real home became Vancouver, Canada, where he settled in the 1960s. Vancouver is where Don Leo Jonathan became a legend. With NWA All-Star Wrestling, he won the Pacific Coast Heavyweight title 5 times between 1970 and 1977. He won the NWA World Tag Team title with Dominic DeNucci in 1966. But here's the record that shows his true dominance. He won the Canadian Tag Team title an incredible 18 times between 1964 and 1966-1978. No one else even came close. But championships don't tell the whole story. What made Don Leo Jonathan special was how he moved. At nearly 6 feet 7 inches tall and weighing between 285 and 340 pounds, he should have been slow and clumsy. Instead, he was doing things that seemed impossible. Eyewitnesses describe him throwing drop kicks like a cruiserweight. He could do backflips and somersaults. He performed standing drop kicks, flying head scissors, leapfrogs, and kip-ups. One fan wrote about seeing him doing a somersault over the top rope and cartwheeling and kipping up. Another described him as moving like a high flyer, even though this is a big man in the 1950s. Wrestling legend Stu Hart put it best. That big man could do and it almost always meant victory for him. But it wasn't just his moves that made him special. It was who he fought and how he fought them. His most famous rivalry was with Andre the Giant, who was then known as Jean Ferret. On May 31st, 1972, Jonathan defeated Andre by disqualification in Montreal. The promoters called it the match of the century, and 16,000 fans packed the Montreal Forum to see it. Their rematch on September 7th, 1972, was called the Battle of the Giants. Here's what makes this incredible. Their series of matches generated Andre's biggest drawing houses prior to his programs with Hulk Hogan. This was before Andre became a worldwide superstar. Don Leo Jonathan was the man who helped create that stardom. He also had intense feuds with Killer Kowalski. During one match in Montreal, something happened that shows how dangerous wrestling really was. Jonathan attempted a body slam on Kowalski, but Kowalski slipped due to sweat and landed wrong. The impact pinched nerves in Kowalski's spine, causing temporary paralysis from the chest down. Kowalski told Jonathan he couldn't move. Jonathan pinned him, and Kowalski was carried out on a stretcher. But amazingly, a chiropractor made an adjustment backstage, and Kowalski returned for the second fall. The crowd thought he had faked the whole thing, but the paralysis was completely real. Don Leo also fought legends like Lou Thez, Bruno Sammartino, Pedro Morales, and Chuck O'Connor, who later became Big John Studd. He even had matches with the Wrestling Bear, showing that no challenge was too strange for him. His most controversial aspect was his Mormon Giant persona. In 1963, the Church Information Service sent him a cease and desist letter telling him to stop using the Mormon Giant name. But Don Leo appealed directly to LDS Church President David O. McKay. McKay, who was actually a wrestling fan, told him to ignore the letter. McKay believed even negative publicity could help the church. As a compromise, Don Leo agreed to direct angry fans to local missionaries after his matches, turning his wrestling persona into a bridge for his faith. Don Leo Jonathan's final match took place on March 10, 1980, in Vancouver. It was fitting that he ended his career alongside two other legends, Andre the Giant and Roddy Piper. Together, they defeated the Sheepherders and Buddy Rose. After 3 decades in the ring, the Mormon Giant walked away on his own terms. Retirement didn't slow him down. He used his Navy diving training to start his own diving company in Western Canada. He became an avid hunter and fisherman, spending his days in the wilderness he loved. This wasn't a man struggling to find purpose after wrestling. This was someone who had always known who he was beyond the ring. Don Leo also tried acting, appearing in the 1978 Sylvester Stallone movie Paradise Alley as a wrestler. He did commercial work too, showing that his larger-than-life personality worked just as well on camera as it did in wrestling rings. But in August 2018, his health began failing. He was hospitalized in British Columbia for 2 months. On October 13, 2018, at the age of 87, Don Leo Jonathan passed away. The man who had spent a lifetime defying gravity finally came to rest. The wrestling world mourned, but they also celebrated. Don Leo Jonathan had been inducted into the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996. He was inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame in 2006. In 2007, he received the Cauliflower Alley Club's Iron Mike Mazurki Award. He was honored across British Columbia in 2005. But the real measure of his legacy comes from his peers. Stu Hart called him one of the greatest wrestlers of his time, and without a doubt, one of the best big men of all time. He's universally recognized as the most athletic big man in the history of the sport. Don Leo Jonathan didn't just have a successful career, he changed what wrestling could be. Before him, big men were expected to be slow and powerful. After him, giants knew they could fly. He set a new standard that influenced generations of wrestlers who came after him. The tragic end in that hospital room was just the final chapter of an incredible story. Don Leo Jonathan lived as a pioneer, a champion, and a man who never forgot his roots. The Mormon Giant may have passed away, but his legacy towers over professional wrestling forever. horrible end. Pat Patterson died from liver failure on December 2nd, 2020. He was 79 years old. Most people saw him as a wrestling legend. But even after his death, disturbing truths kept coming out. New lawsuits emerged. Old victims spoke up. The man who helped create modern wrestling had a much darker story than anyone wanted to admit. Pat Patterson was born Pierre Clermont in Montreal, Canada in 1941. He grew up poor. His family spoke French. At just 14 years old, he started training to be a wrestler. By 1961, he moved to America. He couldn't speak English, but he had big dreams. The 1960s were dangerous for gay men in America. The government hunted them down. They tried to destroy their lives. Pat Patterson found this out the hard way. In 1964, the U.S. Immigration Service started watching him. They knew he was gay. They wanted to deport him back to Canada. Government agents followed Patterson everywhere. They watched him at gay bars. They saw him pick up men. They knew about his boyfriend, Louis Dondero. The agents wrote detailed reports about his private life. In 1966, they called him in for questioning. They asked if he was homosexual. They asked if he molested little boys. This question would haunt his legacy for decades. During this time, Patterson created his wrestling character. He called himself Pretty Boy Pat Patterson. He wore lipstick and sunglasses. He carried a cigarette holder. His promoter knew he was gay. The character was based on gay stereotypes. It was his way of hiding in plain sight, but it also reinforced harmful ideas about gay men. The government tried to deport Patterson in 1966. They served him papers, but somehow he stayed in America. He became a citizen. The threat passed, but the damage was done. The government had already linked his sexuality to child abuse. This connection would follow him for the rest of his life. Patterson became a big star in wrestling. He won many championships. In 1979, he became the first Intercontinental Champion in WWE. He had famous matches at Madison Square Garden. Fans loved him, but behind the scenes, things were different. In 1984, Patterson stopped wrestling full-time. He moved to a backstage role. He became Vince McMahon's right-hand man. He helped create storylines. He invented the Royal Rumble match. This match became one of WWE's biggest events. Patterson had real power in the company, but power can be dangerous. The first major scandal broke in 1992. A young man named Tom Cole came forward. He said Patterson had groped him when he was just 14 years old. This happened in the late 1980s when Cole worked as a ring boy for WWE. Ring boys helped set up the wrestling ring. Many were teenagers. Cole wasn't the only one. Other accusers came forward too. Barry Orton made similar claims. Murray Hodgson also spoke up. A former ring boy named Chris Loss said boys were getting propositioned and played with all the time. The pattern was clear. Multiple people were making similar accusations. The scandal got worse. A wrestler named Superstar Billy Graham appeared on TV. He claimed he saw Patterson assault a child at a WWE event. This was on national television. Millions of people watched. The damage to Patterson's reputation was massive. WWE moved quickly. On March 2nd, 1992, Patterson resigned. Two other men resigned with him. Terry Joyle and Mel Phillips also left the company. It looked like WWE was taking action, but this was just for show. Soon after, Murray Hodgson changed his story. He took back his accusations. WWE used this as an excuse. They brought Patterson back. They said he was cleared of wrongdoing, but the other accusers didn't change their stories. Tom Cole still said Patterson had abused him. Billy Graham later admitted he lied about seeing Patterson assault a child. He said he made it up to get money from WWE. This helped Patterson's reputation, but it didn't erase the other allegations. Multiple accusers were still telling the same story. Tom Cole filed a lawsuit in 1993. He sued WWE, Patterson, and the other men. He wanted justice, but the lawsuit was dismissed in 1994. The legal system failed him. Patterson was back at WWE. He had his power again. Nothing had really changed. After the scandal died down, Patterson rebuilt his career. WWE treated him like nothing had happened. He invented the Royal Rumble match in 1988. This became one of WWE's most popular events. He worked as a creative consultant. He helped plan storylines and matches. Vince McMahon trusted Patterson completely. Everyone in WWE knew Patterson was gay. It was an open secret in the wrestling business, but they protected him anyway. McMahon valued his loyalty. Patterson knew all of WWE's secrets. This gave him protection that others didn't have. Patterson had real influence in WWE. He helped create the Attitude Era in the late 1990s. This was WWE's most successful period. He appeared on TV as McMahon's bumbling assistant. Fans saw him as comic relief. They had no idea about the allegations against him. The wrestling industry knew about Patterson's sexuality for decades, but they kept quiet about it. This wasn't acceptance. It was selective tolerance. Patterson was useful to WWE, so they looked the other way. Other gay wrestlers had to stay in the closet. They feared discrimination. but Patterson was protected because of his position. In 2014, Patterson finally came out publicly. He appeared on a WWE reality show called Legends House. He told the world he was gay. The wrestling media celebrated him. They called him a trailblazer. Headlines praised his courage. Patterson wrote a book in 2016 called Accepted: How the First Gay Superstar Changed WWE. The book focused on his positive impact. It ignored the darker parts of his story. The wrestling world embraced this narrative. They wanted a feel-good story about LGBTQ progress. Stephanie McMahon said gay people were always accepted in WWE. This wasn't true. The company had covered up allegations against Patterson for years. They had silenced accusers. Their acceptance was conditional. It only applied to people who were useful to them. The praise for Patterson hurt his alleged victims. Tom Cole watched as everyone celebrated the man he said had abused him. The wrestling world had forgotten about the 1992 scandal. They only wanted to remember the good parts of Patterson's story. This selective memory caused real pain. In 2025, new legal action started. Maryland passed the Child Victims Act. This law removed time limits on child abuse cases. Survivors could now sue for decades-old abuse. This reopened Patterson's case. 3 new accusers came forward. They filed a lawsuit against WWE and the McMahon family. They claimed Patterson had abused them too. One accuser said wrestler Coco Beware had helped Patterson on one occasion. These were serious new allegations. The lawsuit named Patterson even though he was dead. It also sued WWE, Vince McMahon, and Linda McMahon. The accusers claimed the company was negligent. They said WWE knew about the abuse, but did nothing to stop it. Linda McMahon faced questions about the scandal during her 2025 Senate confirmation hearings. Politicians asked about WWE's handling of abuse allegations. The scandal was still affecting people's careers decades later. The past wouldn't stay buried. The Maryland Supreme Court ruled the Child Victims Act was constitutional. This meant the lawsuit could continue. Patterson's name was back in the news, but this time, it wasn't for his wrestling achievements. It was for the allegations that had followed him his entire career. Pat Patterson died on December 2nd, 2020. The wrestling world mourned his passing. They praised his innovations. They called him a pioneer, but this praise came at a cost. Tom Cole, his alleged victim, couldn't handle it. In February 2021, Tom Cole took his own life. Reports said he was distressed by all the tributes to Patterson. He had spent decades trying to get people to believe him. Instead, they celebrated the man he said had abused him. The pain became too much to bear. Cole's suicide showed the real cost of selective memory. Legal dismissals don't erase trauma. Public praise doesn't heal wounds. The wrestling industry had chosen its narrative, but that choice had deadly consequences for at least one alleged victim. Patterson's legacy can't be separated into good and bad parts. His innovations shaped modern wrestling, but his alleged crimes shaped real lives too. The Royal Rumble happens every year, but so does the pain of his accusers. Both are part of his story. The 2025 lawsuit proves that some stories never really end. New victims are still coming forward. New evidence is still emerging. Patterson may be dead, but his alleged crimes live on. The wrestling industry protected him in life. Now they have to face the consequences in death. Pat Patterson's story is ultimately about power and its abuse. He had power in WWE. He used it to create great entertainment, but multiple people claim he also used it to hurt children. The wrestling world chose to remember only one side of that story. They're still paying the price for that choice today.
I don't know about taking on. Obliterate would be a better word. You know, Steve Austin, you used to be a friend of mine. You used to be in my wrestling school. What happened to you? Your head grew too big.
The tragic downfall of Chris Adams is one of those stories that makes you stop and wonder, was it really all because of drugs, like he said? The violent outbursts, the DUIs, the domestic abuse charges? Can all of that really be blamed on substance abuse? Or was there more going on beneath the surface? Let's dig in and find out. Adams' life came to a shocking and tragic end on October 7th, 2001. He was just 46 years old when a drunken argument with his longtime friend, William Brent Parnell, turned violent. That night, inside Adams' own home in Waxahachie, Texas, the two men got into a heated fight. Things spiraled quickly, and in the chaos, Parnell shot Adams in the chest with a .38 caliber handgun. Adams died on the spot. He was awaiting trial at the time for a manslaughter charge tied to the death of his girlfriend, Linda Kaffengst, who had overdosed on a mix of alcohol and GHB. Just like that, the story of one of wrestling's most talented yet troubled stars came to a violent, heartbreaking close. But this wasn't the first time his drug problem cost him. He had multiple run-ins with the law. Adams struggled with severe alcohol and drug addiction throughout most of his adult life, especially with a drug called GHB, a powerful depressant often linked to date rape, but also abused recreationally. The mix of alcohol and GHB often brought out a terrifying side of Adams. Friends and co-workers described him as having a Jekyll and Hyde personality. Sober, he was polite and charming. Intoxicated, he was violent and unpredictable. In 1986, Adams had a disturbing meltdown on an airplane. After being cut off from more drinks, he headbutted a pilot and punched a flight attendant. The incident got him 90 days in jail and a $500 fine, but it was just the beginning of a pattern. In 1988, he was arrested for severely beating his wife, Toni, during another drunken episode. The injuries were so bad that she needed facial surgery. Adams got 1 year of probation, but the emotional damage left lasting scars, especially for their young son, who later spoke about seeing the photos of his mother's bruised face. There were more incidents. During a trip to Israel, Adams reportedly super-kicked a bartender in the face, causing the man to lose an eye. In 1993, during a wrestling storyline with Rod Price, Adams tore Price's hair weave off mid-match. It may have been an accident, or it may have been on purpose. But either way, it left Price needing over 200 stitches. By the 1990s, Adams' legal problems had piled up. He was arrested multiple times for driving under the influence, DUI in 1991, and was again placed on probation. But the most serious charge came in April 2000. Adams and his girlfriend, Linda Kaffengst, overdosed on a dangerous mix of alcohol and GHB. Adams survived, but Linda didn't. She passed away 10 hours later. In June 2001, Adams was officially indicted and charged with manslaughter in connection with her death. Sadly, he never got to face trial. Just 4 months later, on October 7, 2001, his life ended in that drunken fight with Parnell. Despite all these legal troubles, Adams had a prominent career in wrestling. His story is one of incredible athletic ability and international fame, but also of addiction and personal demons he could never seem to outrun. Adams was born on February 10, 1955, in Rugby, Warwickshire, England. From an early age, he showed signs that he was destined for something big. Before he ever set foot in a wrestling ring, Adams was already making a name for himself in judo. He wasn't just good, he was elite. By the age of 21, Adams had won the British National Judo Championship in his age and weight class 3 times. That kind of discipline and control served him well as he transitioned into professional wrestling, even though that transition came with no formal training. Adams entered the world of pro wrestling in June 1978. He jumped in without traditional wrestling school instruction, instead relying heavily on his judo skills and instincts. He quickly became a regular on ITV's World of Sport, working for joint promotions in the UK. He found early success, winning the British Light Heavyweight Championship from Mark Rollerball Rocco and capturing the British Commonwealth Tag Team title alongside Marty Jones. He faced off against some of the most respected names in British wrestling, including Big Daddy, Adrian Street, Dynamite Kid, and Dave Fit Finlay. But Adams wasn't content to just be a star in Britain. In 1981, he moved to the United States to wrestle at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. The promotion was run by judo legends Mike and Gene LaBelle, which made the transition feel natural. At first, Adams wrestled barefoot, but after that initial US tour, he adopted the full wrestling gear, boots, knee pads, arm pads, that would become part of his signature look. He added athletic and flashy moves to his arsenal, like somersaults out of arm bars, diving attacks, and high-impact kicks. Most notably, he developed the super kick, a move he first referred to as a judo kick. His exciting style and polished presence made him stand out in every ring he stepped into. By 1982, Adams had captured the NWA America's Heavyweight Championship and won the NWA America's Tag Team Championship with partners Tom Pritchard and Ringo Rigby. He lived in Santa Monica and toured frequently, wrestling across California, Mexico, Canada, and even in Japan and Europe. The real turning point in his career came in 1983, when Fritz von Erich invited him to join World-Class Championship Wrestling in Dallas, Texas. WCCW was red hot at the time, and Adams immediately clicked with the crowd. He was seen as an honorary member of the Von Erich family, and even teamed with them regularly against their bitter rivals, the fabulous Freebirds. In 1984, he won the NWA American Heavyweight Championship at the famed Reunion Arena. the first of 5 reigns he would enjoy with that title. Despite being dubbed Gentleman Adams, his in-ring character took a dark turn that same year. In a shocking moment during a match, Adams turned on Kevin Von Erich, smashing a wooden chair over his head. The chair splintered, and Kevin suffered a concussion. It was a key turning point for Adams' career and reputation. The fans who once cheered for him now booed loudly, some even bringing signs that read, "Benedict Adams." That heel turn led to one of the most memorable alliances in WCCW history. Adams joined forces with Gino Hernandez to form the second version of the dynamic duo. They were stylish, cocky, and brutal in the ring. One of their trademarks was humiliating opponents by cutting their hair after a win. Their feud with the Von Erichs, especially Kevin and Kerry, was intense and drew massive crowds. But behind the scenes, tension brewed. Eventually, Adams and Hernandez had a dramatic falling out, both in the ring and personally. Their feud hit its peak in early 1986, when Adams was temporarily blinded by hair cream that Hernandez allegedly rubbed into his eyes. Adams sold the injury so well that he even wore an eye patch during a tour of Japan. Sadly, their storyline came to an abrupt end when Hernandez was found dead on February 4th, 1986, under mysterious circumstances. After that, Adams continued to wrestle in Texas, joining Texas All-Star Wrestling and later the Universal Wrestling Federation. He worked feuds with Terry Taylor and Iceman King Parsons, and in the late 80s, he started promoting his own events under the banner of L&A Promotions. During this time, he also opened a wrestling school at the Dallas Sportatorium. One of his students was a young man named Steve Austin. Adams trained him, gave him early opportunities, and even feuded with him. But years later, Austin had harsh words for his former mentor, accusing Adams of taking advantage of trainees and being dishonest. In the 1990s, Adams kept working in the wrestling business, appearing for Global Wrestling Federation, where he won their heavyweight title twice, Jim Crockett's NWA, and several independent promotions across the country. He even wrestled in Mexico and participated in a Pepsi-sponsored tour in Nigeria. In 1997, he joined World Championship Wrestling, where he was used mostly in mid-card matches. He was briefly considered for a stable with Lord Steven Regal and Squire David Taylor, but the idea fizzled. Adams did feud with Glacier over the use of the super kick and even wrestled Randy Savage on the debut episode of WCW Thunder. But by 1999, dissatisfied with how he was being used, Adams left WCW. Unfortunately, as Adams's wrestling opportunities shrank, his personal life became more unstable. He had several relationships over the years. He was with Jeannie Clark in the early days, and they had a daughter named Jade. He later married Toni Collins in 1984, and they had a son, Christopher Jr. That marriage ended in divorce in 1994. Adams also had a daughter, Julia, with another partner, Brandy Freeman. Tragically, Freeman died in 2003 from a drug overdose, leaving Julia orphaned. On October 7, 2001, after a night of drinking, Adams and Parnell got into a violent argument. The fight escalated until Parnell shot Adams in the chest, killing him. Parnell claimed self-defense and was later acquitted. Adams' death left the wrestling world stunned. Here was a man who had once captivated audiences with his good looks, British accent, and incredible talent. A man who helped innovate moves that are still used today. But his demons had followed him everywhere, dragging him down at every stage of life. In 2008, a documentary titled The Gentleman's Choice was released by former WCCW promoter Mickey Grant. It featured interviews with Adams' family, friends, and wrestling peers. And in 2024, Dark Side of the Ring aired an episode about Adams, taking a deep dive into both his rise and fall. Wrestling historian Dave Meltzer called him one of the 20 best performers in the United States during his prime, but also noted that Adams' self-destructive behavior ultimately destroyed both his career and his life. The story of Chris Adams is one of talent, charm, and great promise, but also of loss, addiction, and heartbreak. He had all the tools to become a lasting legend in the wrestling world, but he could never fully conquer the chaos that seemed to follow him. He will be remembered not just for the titles he won or the moves he innovated, but also as a tragic figure, a cautionary tale of what can happen when brilliance is paired with unchecked demons. And that's a wrap for today's video. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an update. See you next time. Bye.
Wonderful. Who is Mr. Wonderful? Let me tell you, this is a new generation. You're looking at...
Nobody ever saw it coming. The heartbreaking downfall of Dr. Death, Steve Williams. He was a powerhouse in the ring, a real tough guy who seemed almost unstoppable. But in the end, it wasn't an opponent that took him down. It was something far more cruel. Throat cancer ended his life way too soon, and it's a tragedy that still hits hard. So today, let's take a closer look at what really happened to Steve Williams and how his story took such a heartbreaking turn. Steve Williams' story took a heartbreaking turn in his later years, and a big part of that was his battle with throat cancer. It was a fight that really shook the wrestling world. Known as Dr. Death, he had a reputation for being one of the toughest men to ever step inside a wrestling ring. So when news broke that he was fighting something as serious as cancer, it didn't seem real. He was a warrior, strong, fearless, and larger than life. At first, it looked like he beat it. He was declared cancer-free and even made an incredible return to the ring, showing everyone that he still had that fighting spirit. But sadly, the cancer came back, and this time, it was too much. In 2009, at just 49 years old, Steve Williams passed away. It was a loss that hit hard, and for many fans, it was even more shocking than the drug troubles he had faced earlier in life. You see, Williams' struggles didn't start with cancer. Back in 1988, he was reportedly caught with a stash of drugs that included cocaine, marijuana, mushrooms, barbiturates, and steroids. That incident was just the start of a string of problems that followed him. He ran into trouble at airports in both Texas and Michigan, getting arrested for drug-related issues. In 1994, things got even worse when he was detained at a Japanese airport. That incident led to a one-year ban from wrestling in Japan, one of the places where he was actually a big star. Eventually, he was allowed back, but the damage had already been done. The image of Dr. Death had taken a serious hit. Even with those setbacks, Steve Williams still had big moments left in his career. In 1998, he joined WWE, still called WWF at the time, and there were huge plans for him. The company saw him as a legit tough guy who could go toe-to-toe with their top stars. In fact, there were early talks about setting up a major feud between Williams and Stone Cold Steve Austin. That could have been career-changing, but then came one of the strangest and most damaging ideas in WWE history, the Brawl for All tournament. Now, if you're not familiar with it, the Brawl for All was a real-life tough men competition where wrestlers had to box each other for real. No scripts, no acting, just fists flying. The whole thing was the brainchild of Vince Russo, and to this day, it's looked back on as a complete disaster. Williams was expected to dominate the tournament. With his legit background in amateur wrestling and his reputation for being a real bruiser, he seemed like a sure bet to win it all. But wrestling is full of surprises, sometimes the bad kind. In the second round of the tournament, Williams went up against Bart Gunn, and in a moment that stunned everyone, Bart knocked him out cold. That one punch didn't just end a match, it ended Williams' momentum in WWE. The company had been ready to push him into the main event scene, but after that loss, all those plans were scrapped. On top of that, Williams suffered a torn hamstring during the fight, which only made things worse. His WWE run, which had started with so much hope, was suddenly going nowhere. Looking back, the knockout in Brawl for All was more than just a loss, it was a turning point. It knocked him off the big stage in WWE, and while he still wrestled in other promotions after that, he never quite reached the same level again. Combine that with his earlier drug issues and the heartbreaking battle with cancer, and you get the full picture of a man who went through more than his fair share of pain. It's just as important to remember everything he accomplished in his career too. So let's take a look back, shall we? His pro wrestling journey officially began in 1982, when he was trained by none other than Bill Watts and Buddy Landel, two seasoned veterans who saw serious potential in him. Williams broke into the business through Mid-South Wrestling, the gritty, hard-hitting promotion run by Watts himself. With his legit athletic background and raw intensity, it didn't take long for Williams to make an impression. Fans were drawn to his physical style, and promoters saw star potential. By 1985, just a few years into his career, he was already getting major opportunities. One of his earliest big angles came when he teamed up with Ted DiBiase in a fierce and memorable feud against Eddie Gilbert and the Nightmare. The rivalry was intense, filled with brutal brawls and high drama, just the kind of spotlight Williams needed to raise his profile. Then in 1986, a big shift happened. Mid-South Wrestling rebranded itself as the Universal Wrestling Federation, aiming to go national. This was a turning point, not just for the promotion, but for Williams too. The new branding brought more attention, more TV time, and a bigger stage, and Williams took full advantage of it. That same year, he captured the UWF Heavyweight Championship by defeating Big Bubba Rogers. It was a defining moment. No longer just a promising athlete, Williams had officially arrived as a top-tier talent. His victory showed that he wasn't just a powerhouse. He had the skill, presence, and toughness to carry a promotion. When Jim Crockett Promotions bought out the UWF in 1987, only a few wrestlers from that roster got a real push in the new setup, and Williams was one of them. He appeared regularly in the NWA and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and even had stints in World Class and New Japan Pro Wrestling. In 1988, he got caught up in a wild storyline involving Jimmy Garvin, Kevin Sullivan, and the Varsity Club. Williams first fought against them, but then flipped sides and joined the Varsity Club later that year. He won tag titles alongside Sullivan and later with Mike Rotunda, taking on some of the top teams like the Road Warriors. By mid-1989, the Varsity Club had broken up, and Williams switched back to being a good guy. He had a short feud with Rotunda and then got into a storyline with Lex Luger. Williams was supposed to challenge Luger for the US title at Wrestle War 1990, but plans changed after Sting got injured, and Luger was bumped up to the main event. Shortly after that, Williams left the company. But his story didn't slow down. He jumped to Japan and wrestled at the Tokyo Dome in early 1990, beating Salman Hashimov. Then he made a major move to All Japan Pro Wrestling, teaming up with Terry Gordy to form the Miracle Violence Connection. They'd actually started teaming back in the Crockett days, but Japan took them to another level. In March 1990, they beat legends Stan Hansen and Genichiro Tenryu for the AJPW Tag Team titles. Throughout the early 90s, Williams split time between All Japan and New Japan, which was unusual back then. But by 1991, he was full-time in All Japan and a fan favorite. In 1992, he and Gordy even returned to WCW for a brief run, winning the WCW tag titles and making it to the finals of the NWA Tag Team Tournament. They had wars with the Steiner brothers and the Dangerous Alliance before eventually dropping the titles and heading back to Japan. Williams continued to rise in Japan. In 1994, he beat Mitsuharu Misawa for the prestigious Triple Crown Championship, one of the biggest moments of his career. Over the years, he defeated top names like Kenta Kobashi and Jun Akiyama, building his legacy as one of the most successful foreign wrestlers in Japanese history. His final match in All Japan's first run came in 1998, where he gave a heartfelt farewell to Giant Baba and the fans before heading to the WWF. In the late 1990s, Williams made a notable appearance in Extreme Championship Wrestling. At the event Crossing the Line Again in February 1997, he faced Raven for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. Despite a valiant effort, Williams suffered his first defeat in the United States in over a decade, marking a significant moment in his career. Williams' reputation as a formidable wrestler caught the attention of the World Wrestling Federation, leading to his signing in May 1998. He was brought in with high expectations, particularly for the Brawl for All tournament, a series of legitimate fights among wrestlers. Unfortunately, during a match against Bart Gunn, Williams suffered a torn quadriceps and was knocked out, derailing his momentum and leading to a period of recovery. After healing, Williams returned to WWF in early 1999, engaging in various storylines, including a brief partnership with commentator Jim Ross. He also had feuds with wrestlers like Hardcore Holly and Tiger Ali Singh. Despite these efforts, Williams was released from WWF in April 1999, partly due to lingering injuries and creative differences. Seeking new opportunities, Williams briefly joined World Championship Wrestling later that year. He participated in matches alongside manager Oklahoma, and feuded with wrestlers like Vampiro. However, his time in WCW was short-lived, and by the end of 1999, he returned to All Japan Pro Wrestling, where he had previously found significant success. In AJPW, Williams revitalized his career, forming a tag team with Big Van Vader and capturing the World Tag Team Championship. He engaged in memorable feuds with wrestlers such as Toshiaki Kawada and Keiji Muto, showcasing his enduring talent and determination. Williams continued to wrestle in Japan until early 2003, when he decided to focus on opportunities in the United States. Back in the US, Williams worked with various independent promotions, including the Christian Wrestling Federation, where he became the heavyweight champion. His commitment to his faith was evident, as he used his platform to inspire others and share his beliefs. In March 2004, Williams faced his toughest opponent yet, throat cancer. He underwent surgery and by March 2005 was declared cancer-free. Demonstrating his indomitable spirit, Williams returned to the ring, wrestling matches and mentoring young talent in Ohio Valley Wrestling, WWE's developmental territory. Williams continued to make appearances in various wrestling promotions, sharing his experiences and inspiring others with his story of perseverance. After the tragic death of his friend and rival, Mitsuharu Misawa in 2009, Williams decided to retire from wrestling. His final match took place in August 2009, where he won the ACW Heavyweight Championship before vacating the title and stepping away from the ring. Steve "Dr. Death" Williams passed away on December 29, 2009. His legacy lives on through his contributions to professional wrestling and the countless lives he touched with his resilience and unwavering faith. That brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.